Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Adventure Mystery Book Club. I'm Bill Mallory, branch manager of the La Jolla Library. Although, as you can see, not at the La Jolla Library today. This is another one of those days where, due to unforeseen circumstances, I am actually at home right now. So that means that as we do our reading for today, you may hear the sounds of hammering as there is some construction going on over here. You may also hear my dogs barking, which looks like it will probably be imminent. But we are reading Treasure Island today, and I'm so glad that you could join me for today's reading. We are reading chapters 27, 28, and 29. So, just to give you a brief recap on what we have done, what we have read up to this point. In our last reading, Jim Hawkins, our brave young teenager who has come all this way, there's the dogs, has taken a small ship, a small boat, a coracle that was designed and hewed out from wood by Ben Gunn, the stranded pirate who had been trapped on Treasure Island for the last 3 years. And he, Jim Hawkins, sailed it to the Hispaniola. He knew from listening to the comments of to the noise that was going on board the ship, that the sailors, the mutineers, were all drunk and they were all probably passed out. So he does a couple of things. He cuts the very thick rope that attaches the anchor to the Hispaniola and sets it adrift. Next, he is able to paddle his way closer to the ship, jump off of the coracle. Jumping off sinks the coracle, so he has no other option but to grab hold of the Hispaniola and climb up and into the ship. And from there, he pretty much confirms his belief that everyone is drunk and passed out, because they pretty much are. And he sees on the deck one of the mutineers, Israel Hands, who has passed out, but not before murdering one of his other mutinous pirates. So Israel Hands wakes up. Jim Hawkins strikes a deal with him, which is basically that he will that Israel Hands has got the worst of this and will not be able to. He has a wound in his thigh from the person that he was arguing with and whom he later killed, the man in the red cap, whose name is, that we find out, is O'Brien. And he makes a deal with him saying, help me steer this ship, and we will get help, and at least you can live through this. And Israel Hands agrees to this, and they do that. Basically, what happens is they sail the ship around the side of Treasure Island to a beach where they are able to basically ground the ship temporarily, with the knowledge that they will be able to more easily take it out of that grounding, off the beach. And then once they beach the Hispaniola, Israel Hands' true colors come out, and he pulls out a knife, ready to kill Jim Hawkins, who has proclaimed himself captain of the Hispaniola, since he is the only one on board who is not a mutineer. And so what happens is, it's a really tense scene. And what happens is Jim still has 2 guns that he has taken from Ben Gunn, and he has got them ready, and of course they don't fire because he's gotten all wet from the ocean. So Israel Hands is still coming after him with a knife, a dirk, and Jim climbs the rigging in order to get away from him, And, of course, with Israel Hand's wounded thigh, he has trouble getting up, but he does get up. But by the time he gets there, Jim has already reloaded the two guns. The next thing he sees is the dirk is being thrown at him. It hits him in the shoulder. It says, according to the reading, that he is pinned through the shoulder to the mast, which causes his hands to flinch. The guns go off, and Israel Hands falls dead. And that's where we left it. Very dramatic, very, certainly adventure-filled for our Treasure Island as we are reaching towards the latter chapters here. And I have now, since I do not have the copy of Treasure Island that I have at work, at the library, I have my tablet here, which I will be reading the off of Project Gutenberg, and I certainly hope that you are reading along. And as we begin chapter 27, which is entitled Pieces of Eight. Winging to the cant of the vessel, the masts hung far out over the water, and from my perch on the cross trees, I had nothing below me but the surface of the bay. Hans, who was not so far up, was in consequence nearer to the ship, and fell between me and the bulwarks. He rose once to the surface in a leather of foam and blood, and then sank again for good. As the water settled, I could see him lying huddled together on the clean, bright sand in the shadow of the vessel's sides. A fish or two whipped past his body. Sometimes by the quivering of the waters he appeared to move a little, as if he were trying to rise. But he was dead enough. For all that, being both shot and drowned, was food for fish in the very place where he had designed my slaughter. I was no sooner certain of this than I began to feel sick, faint, and terrified. The hot blood was running over my back and chest. The dirk, where it had pinned my shoulder to the mast, seemed to burn like a hot iron. Yet it was not so much these real sufferings that distressed me, for these, it seemed to me, I could bear without a murmur. It was the horror I had upon my mind of falling from the cross trees and into that still green water beside the body of the coxswain. I clung with both hands till my nails ached, and I shut my eyes as if to cover up the peril. Gradually my mind came back again, my pulses quieted down to a more natural time, and I was once more in possession of myself. It was my first thought to pluck forth the dirk, but either it stuck too hard or my nerve failed me, and I desisted with a violent shudder. Oddly enough, that very shudder did the business. The knife, in fact, had come the nearest in the world to missing me altogether. It held me by a mere pinch of skin, and this the shudder tore away. The blood ran down the faster, to be sure, but I was my own master again, and only tacked to the mast by my coat and shirt. These last I broke through with a sudden jerk, and then regained the deck by the starboard shrouds. For nothing in the world would I have again ventured, shaken as I was, upon the overhanging port shrouds, from which Israel had so lately fallen. I went below and did what I could for my wound. It pained me a good deal, and still bled freely, but it was neither deep nor dangerous, nor did it greatly gall me when I used my arm. Then I looked around me, and, as the ship was now, in a sense, my own, I began to think of clearing it from its last passenger, the dead man, O'Brien. He had pitched, as I have said, against the bulwarks, where he lay like some horrible, ungainly sort of puppet. Life-size indeed, but how different from life's color or life's comeliness. In that position, I could easily have my way with him as the habit of tragical adventures had worn off almost all of my terror for the dead. I took him by the waist as if he had been a sack of bran, and with one good heave tumbled him overboard. He went in with a sounding plunge. The red cap came off and remained floating on the surface, and as soon as the splash subsided, I could see him and Israel lying side by side, both wavering with the tremulous movement of the water. O'Brien, though still quite a young man, was very bald. There he lay, with that bald head across the knees of the man who had killed him, and the quick fishes steering to and fro over both. I was now alone upon the ship. The tide had just turned. The sun was within so few degrees of setting that already the shadow of the pines upon the western shore began to reach right across the anchorage and fall in patterns on the deck. The evening breeze had sprung up, and though it was well warded off by the hill with the two peaks upon the east, the cordage had begun to sing a little softly to itself, and the idle sails to rattle to and fro. I began to see a danger to the ship. The jibs I speedily doused and brought tumbling to the deck, but the mainsail was a harder matter. Of course, when the schooner canted over, the boom had swung outboard, and the cap of it and a foot or two of sail hung even under water. I thought this made it still more dangerous, yet the strain was so heavy that I half feared to meddle. At last I got my knife and cut the halyards. The peak dropped instantly. A great belly of loose canvas floated broad upon the water, and since pull as I liked, I could not budge the downhaul. That was the extent of what I could accomplish. For the rest, the Hispaniola must trust to luck like myself. By this time, the whole anchorage had fallen into shadow. The last rays I remember falling through a glade of the wood and shining bright as jewels on the flowery mantle of the wreck. It began to be chill. The tide was rapidly fleeing seaward, the schooner settling more and more on her beam ends. I scrambled forward and looked over. It seemed shallow enough, and holding the cut hawser in both hands for a last security, I let myself drop softly overboard. The water scarcely reached my waist. The sand was firm and covered with ripple marks, and I waded ashore in great spirits, leaving the Hispaniola on her side, with her mainsail trailing wide upon the surface of the bay. About the same time the sun went fairly down, and the breeze whistled low in the dusk among the tossing pines. At least, and at last, I was off the sea, nor had I returned thence empty-handed. There lay the schooner, clear at last from buccaneers, and ready for our own men to board and get to sea again. I had nothing nearer my fancy than to get home to the stockade and broad boast of my achievements. Possibly I might be blamed for a bit for my truantry, but the recapture of the Hispaniola was a clenching answer, and I hoped that even Captain Smollett would confess I had not lost my time. So, thinking and in famous spirits, I began to set my face homeward for the blockhouse and my companions. I remembered that the most easterly of the rivers which drain into Captain Kidd's anchorage ran from the two-peaked hill upon my left, and bent my course in that direction, that I might pass the stream while it was small. The wood was pretty open, and keeping along the lower spurs, I had soon turned the corner of that hill, and not long after waded to the mid-calf across the watercourse. This brought me near to where I had encountered Ben Gunn, the maroon. and I walked more circumspectly, keeping an eye on every side. The dusk had come nigh hand completely, and as I opened out the cleft between the two peaks, I became aware of a wavering glow against the sky, where, as I judged, the man of the island was cooking his supper before a roaring fire. And yet I wondered in my heart that he should show himself so careless, for if I could see this radiance, might it not reach the eyes of Silver himself, where he camped upon the shore among the marshes? Gradually the night fell blacker. It was all I could do to guide myself even roughly towards my destination. The double hill behind me and the spyglass on my right hand loomed faint and fainter. The stars were few and pale, and in the low ground where I wandered I kept tripping among the bushes and rolling into sandy pits. Suddenly a kind of brightness fell about me. I looked up. A pale glimmer of moonbeams had alighted on the summit of the spyglass, and soon after I saw something broad and silvery moving low down behind the trees, and knew the moon had risen. With this to help me, I passed rapidly over what remained to me of my journey, and sometimes walking, sometimes running, impatiently drew near to the stockade. Yet, as I began to thread the grove that lies before it, I was not so thoughtless, but that I slacked my pace and went a trifle warily. It would have been a poor end of my adventures to get shot down by my own party in mistake. The moon was climbing higher and higher. Its light began to fall here and there in masses through the more open districts of the wood, and right in front of me a glow of a different color appeared among the trees. It was red and hot, and now and again it was a little darkened, as it were, the embers of a bonfire smoldering. For the life of me I could not think what it might be. At last I came right down upon the borders of the clearing. The western end was already steeped in moonshine. The rest, and the blockhouse itself, still lay in black shadow, checkered with long silvery streaks of light. On the other side of the house, an immense fire burned itself into clear embers and shed a steady red reverberation, contrasted strongly with the mellow paleness of the moon. There was not a soul stirring, nor a sound beside the noises of the breeze. I stopped with much wonder in my heart, and perhaps a little terror also. It had not been our way to build great fires. We were, indeed, by the captain's orders, somewhat niggardly of firewood, and I began to fear that something had gone wrong while I was absent. I stole around by the eastern end, keeping close to in shadow, and at a convenient place where the darkness was thickest, crossed the palisade. To make assurance surer, I got upon my hands and knees and crawled, without a sound, towards the corner of the house. As I drew nearer, my heart was suddenly and greatly lightened. It is not a pleasant noise in itself, and I have often complained of it at other times, but just then it was like music to hear my friends snoring together so loud and peaceful in their sleep. The sea cry of the watch, that beautiful "all's well," never fell more reassuringly on my ear. In the meantime, there was no doubt of one thing. They kept an infamous bad watch. If it had been Silver and his lads that were now creeping in on them, not a soul would have seen daybreak. That was what it was, thought I, to have the captain wounded, and again I blamed myself sharply for leaving them in that danger with so few to mount guard. By this time I had got to the door and stood up. All was dark within, so that I could distinguish nothing by eye. As for sounds, there was the steady drone of the snorers and a small occasional noise, a flickering or pecking that I could in no way account for. With my arms before me, I walked steadily in. I should lie down in my place, I thought with a silent chuckle, and enjoy their faces when they found me in the morning. My foot struck something yielding. It was a sleeper's leg, and he turned and groaned, but without awaking. And then all of a sudden a shrill voice broke forth out of the darkness. "Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8!" and so forth. Without pause or change, like the clacking of a tiny mill. Silver's green parrot, Captain Flint. It was she whom I had heard pecking at a piece of bark. It was she, keeping better watch than any human being, who thus announced my arrival with her wearisome refrain. I had no time left me to recover. At the sharp, clipping tone of the parrot, the sleepers awoke and sprang up, and with a mighty oath, the voice of Silver cried, "Who goes?" I turned to run, struck violently against one person, recoiled, and ran full into the arms of a second, who, for his part, closed upon and held me tight. "Bring a torch, Dick," said Silver, when my capture was thus assured, and one of the men left the log house and presently returned with a lighted brand. That's chapter 27. Hold on just a second here as I open a bottle one-handed. This brings us to part 6 of Treasure Island, which is entitled Captain Silver. Chapter 28 is called In the Enemy's Camp. The red glare of the torch lighting up the interior of the blockhouse showed me the worst of my apprehensions realized. The pirates were in possession of the house and stores. There was the cask of cognac, there were the port and bread as before, and what tenfold increased my horror, not a sign of any prisoner. I could only judge that all had perished, and my heart smote me sorely, for that I had not been there to perish with them. There were 6 of the buccaneers, all told. Not another man was left alive. 5 of them were on their feet, flushed and swollen, suddenly called out of the first sleep of drunkenness. The 6th had only risen upon his elbow. He was deadly pale, and the blood-stained bandage around his head told that he had recently been wounded, and still more recently dressed. I remembered the man who had been shot and had run back among the woods in the great attack, and doubted not that this was he. The parrot sat preening her plumage on Long John's shoulder. He himself, I thought, looked somewhat paler and more stern than I was used to. He still wore the fine broadcloth suit in which he had fulfilled his mission. But it was bitterly the worse for wear, daubed with clay and torn with sharp briars of the wood. "So," said he, "here's Jim Hawkins, shiver me timbers. Dropped in like well, come, I take that friendly." And thereupon he sat down across the brandy cask and began to fill a pipe. "Give me a loan of the link, Dick," said he, and then, when he had a good light, "That'll do, lad," he added. "Stick the glim in the wood heap, and you gentlemen bring yourselves too. You needn't stand up for Mr. Hawkins. He'll excuse you, you may lay to that. And so, Jim," stopping the tobacco, "here you were, and quite a pleasant surprise for poor old John. I see you were smart when first I set eyes on you, but this here gets away from me clean, it do." To all this, as may be well supposed, I made no answer. They had set me with my back against the wall, and I stood there, looking Silver in the face, pluckily enough, I hope, to all outward appearances, but with black despair in my heart. Silver took a whiff or two of his pipe with great composure, and then ran on again. "Now you see, Jim, so be as you are here," says he, "I'll give you a piece of my mind. I've always liked you, I have, for a lad of spirit, and the picture of my own self when I was young and handsome. I always wanted you to shine and take your share and die a gentleman. And now, my cock, you've got two. Captain Smollett's a fine seaman, as I'll own up to any day, but stiff on discipline. Duty is duty, says he, and right he is. Just you keep clear of the captain. The doctor himself is gone dead agin ye. Ungrateful scamp, was what he said, and the short and the long of the whole story is about here. You can't go back to your own lot, for they won't have you, and without you, start a third ship's company all by yourself, which might be lonely. You'll have to join with Captain Silver. So far, so good, my friends. My friends, then, were still alive, and though I partly believed the truth in Silver's statement that the cabin party were incensed at me for my desertion, I was more relieved than distressed by what I heard. "I don't say nothing as to your being in our hands," continued Silver, "though there you are, and you may lay to it. I'm all for argument. I never seen good come out of threatening. If you like the service, well, you'll join, and if you don't, Jim, well, you're free to answer no. Free and welcome, shipmate, if fairer can be said by mortal seamen, shiver my sides." "Am I to answer, then?" I asked, with a very tremulous voice. Through all this sneering talk, I was made to feel the threat of death that overhung me, and my cheeks burned and my heart beat painfully in my breast. "Lad," said Silver, "no one's a-pressing of you. Take your bearings. None of us won't hurry you, mate. Time goes so pleasant in your company, you see." "Well," says I, growing a bit bolder, "if I'm to choose, I declare I have a right to know what's what, and why you're here, and where my friends are." "What's what?" repeated one of the buccaneers in a deep growl. "Ah, he'll be as a lucky one as knowed that." "You'll perhaps batten down your hatches till you're spoke to, my friend," cried Silver truculently to this speaker, and then in his first gracious tones he replied to me. "Yesterday morning, Mr. Hawkins," says he, "in the dog watch, down came Dr. Livesey with a flag of truce. Says he, 'Captain Silver, you're sold out. Ship's gone.' Well, maybe we'd been taking a glass and a song to help it round. I won't say no. Leastways, none of us had looked out. We looked out, and by thunder, the old ship was gone. I never seen a pack of fools look fishier, and you may lay to that, if I tells you that looked the fishiest. Well, says the doctor, let's bargain. We bargained, him and I, and here we are, stores, brandy, blockhouse, and the firewood you was thoughtful enough to cut, and, in a manner of speaking, the whole blessed boat, from Cross Trees to Kelson. As for them, they've tramped. I don't know where's they are. He drew again quietly at his pipe. And lest you should take it in that head of yours, he went on, that you was included in the treaty, here's the last word that was said. How many are you, says I, to leave? 4, says he. 4, and one of us wounded. As for that boy, I don't know where he is, confound him, says he. Nor I don't much care. We're about sick of him. These are his words. "Is that all?" I asked. "Well, it's all that you're to hear, my son," returned Silver. "And now I am to choose." "And now you are to choose, and you may lay to that," said Silver. "Well," said I am not such a fool, but I know pretty well what I have to look for. Let the worst come to the worst, it's little I care. I've seen too many die since I fell in with you. But there's a thing or two I have to tell you," I said, and by this time I was quite excited. "And the first is this. Here you are, in a bad way, the ship's lost, treasure lost, men lost, your whole business gone to wreck. And if you want to know who did it, it was I. I was in the apple barrel the night we sighted land, and I heard you, John, and you, Dick Johnson, and Hans, who is now at the bottom of the sea, and told every word you said before the hour was out. And as for the schooner, it was I who cut her cable, and it was I that killed the men you had aboard her. It was I who brought her where you'll never see her more, not one of you. The laugh's on my side. I've had the top of this business from the start. I no more fear you than I fear a fly. Kill me, if you please, or spare me. But one thing I'll say, and no more. If you spare me, bygones are bygones, and when you fellows are in court for piracy, I'll save you all I can. It is for you to choose. Kill another and do yourselves no good, or spare me and keep a witness to save you from the gallows." I stopped, for I tell you I was out of breath, and to my wonder, not a man of them moved. But all sat staring at me like as many sheep, and while they were still staring, I broke out again. "And now, Mr. Silver," I said, "I believe you're the best man here, and if things go the worst, I'll take it kind of you to let the doctor know the way I took it." "I'll bear it in mind," said Silver, with an accent so curious that I could not for the life of me decide whether he were laughing at my request or had been favorably affected by my courage. "I'll put one to that," cried the old mahogany-faced seaman, Morgan by name, whom I had seen in Long John's public house upon the quays of Bristol. "It was him that knowed Black Dog." "Well, and see here," added the sea cook, "I'll put another again to that, by thunder, for it was this same boy that faked the chart from Billy Bones. First and last we've split upon Jim Hawkins." Then here goes," said Morgan with an oath. And he sprang up, drawing his knife as if he had been 20. "Avast there!" cried Silver. "Who are you, Tom Morgan? Maybe you thought you was captain here, perhaps. By the powers, but I'll teach you better. Cross me, and you'll go where many a good man's gone before you, first and last these 30 years back, some to the yardarm, shiver me timbers, and some by the board, and all to feed the fishes. There's never a man looked at me between the eyes and seen a good day afterwards, Tom Morgan, you may lay to that." Morgan paused, but a hoarse murmur rose from the others. "Tom's right," said one. "I stood hazing long enough from one," added another. "I'll be hanged if I'll be hazed by you, John Silver." "Did any of you gentlemen want to have it out with me?" roared Silver, bending far forward from his position on the keg, and with his pipe still glowing in his right hand. "Put a name on what you're at. You ain't dumb, I reckon. Him that wants shall get it. Have I lived this many years, and a son of a rum-punchin' cocket, his hat athwart, and my hoss at the latter end of it? You know the way, you're all gentlemen of fortune, by your account. Well, I'm ready. Take a cutlass, him that dares, and I'll see the color of his inside, crutch and all, before the pipe's empty. Not a man stirred. Not a man answered. That's your sort, is it? He added, returning the pipe to his mouth. Well, you're a gay lot to look at anyway. Not much worth to fight, you ain't. Perhaps you can understand King George's English. I'm captain here by election. I'm captain here because I'm the best man by a long sea mile. You won't fight as gentlemen of fortune should. Then, by thunder, you'll obey, and you may lay to it. I like that boy now. I never seen a better boy than that. He's more a man than any pair of rats of you in this here house. And what I say is this. Let me see him that'll lay a hand on him. That's what I say, and you may lay to it. There was a long pause after this. I stood straight up against the wall, my heart still going like a sledgehammer, but with a ray of hope now shining in my bosom. Silver leaned back against the wall, his arms crossed, his pipe in the corner of his mouth, as calm as though he had been in church. Yet his eye kept wandering furtively, and he kept the tail of it on his unruly followers. They, on their part, drew gradually together towards the far end of the blockhouse, and the low hiss of their whispering sounded in my ear continuously like a stream. One after another they would look up, and the red light of the torch would fall for a second on their nervous faces. But it was not towards me. It was towards Silver that they turned their eyes. You seem to have a lot to say, remarked Silver, spitting far into the air. Pipe up and let me hear it, or lay to. Ax your pardon, sir, returned one of the men. You're pretty free with some of the rules. Maybe you'll kindly keep an eye upon the rest. This crew's dissatisfied. This crew don't vally bullying a marlin spike. This crew has its rights, like other crews. I'll make so free as that, and by your own rules I take it we can talk together. I ax your pardon, sir, acknowledging you for to be captain at this present, but I claim my right, and steps outside for a council. And with an elaborate sea salute, this fellow, a long, ill-looking, yellow-eyed man of 35, stepped coolly towards the door and disappeared out of the house. One after another, the rest followed his example, each making a salute as he passed, each adding some apology. According to rules, said one. Forecastle council, said Morgan. And so with one remark or another, all marched out and left Silver and me alone with the torch. The sea cook instantly removed his pipe. Now look you here, Jim Hawkins, he said in a steady whisper that was no more than audible. You're within half a plank of death, and what's a long sight worse, of torture. They're going to throw me off, but you mark, I stand by I stand by you through thick and thin. I didn't mean to. No, not till you spoke up. I was about desperate to lose that much blunt and be hanged into the bargain. But I see you was the right sort. I says to myself, you stand by Hawkins, John, and Hawkins will stand by you. You're his last card, and by the living thunder, John, he's yours. Back to back, says I, you save your witness, and he'll save your neck. I began dimly to understand. You mean all's lost? I asked. Excuse me. One thing or another, it seems, doesn't it? You mean all's lost? I asked. Aye, by gum, I do, he answered. Ship's gone, neck gone. That's the size of it. Once I looked into that bay, Jim Hawkins, and seen no schooner. Well, I'm tough, but I gave out. As for that lot and their counsel, mark me, they're outright fools and cowards. I'll save your life, if so be as I can. from them. But see here, Jim, tit for tat, you save Long John from swinging. I was bewildered. It seemed a thing so hopeless he was asking. He, the old buccaneer, the ringleader throughout. What I can do, that I'll do, I said. It's a bargain, cried Long John. You speak up plucky, and by thunder, I've a chance. He hobbled to the torch where it stood propped among the firewood and took a fresh light to his pipe. Understand me, Jim, he said, returning. I've a head on my shoulders, I have. I'm on Squire's side now. I know you've got the ship safe somewheres. How you done it, I don't know, but safe it is. I guess Hans and O'Brien turned soft. I never much believe in neither of them. Now you mark me, I ask no questions, nor I won't let others. I know when a game's up, I do. I know a lad that's staunch. But you that's young, you and me might have done a power of good together. He drew some cognac from the cask into a tin cannikin. Will you taste, messmate? He asked, when I had refused. Well, I'll take a dram myself, Jim, said he. I need a caulker, for there's trouble on hand, and, talking of trouble, why did that doctor give me the chart, Jim? My face expressed a wonder so unaffected that he saw the needlessness of further questions. Ah, well, he did, though, said he, and there's something under that, no doubt. Something surely under that, Jim, bad or good. And he took another swallow of brandy, shaking his great fair head like a man who looks forward to the worst. Sorry, the dogs are being particularly troublesome today. But here we are at chapter 29, which is entitled The Black Spot Again. The council of buccaneers had lasted some time, when one of them re-entered the house, and with a repetition of the same salute, which had in my eyes an ironical air, begged for a moment's loan of the torch. Silver briefly agreed, and this emissary retired again, leaving us together in the dark. There's a breeze coming, Jim, said Silver, who had by this time adopted quite a friendly and familiar tone. I turned to the loophole nearest me and looked out. The embers of the great fire had so far burned themselves out and now glowed so low and duskily that I understood why these conspirators desired a torch. About halfway down the slope to the stockade, they were collected in a group. One held the light, another was on his knees in their midst, and I saw the blade of an open knife shine in his hand with varying colors in the moon and torchlight. The rest were all somewhat stooping, as though watching the maneuvers of this last. I could just make out that he had a book, as well as a knife, in his hand, and was still wondering how anything so incongruous had come in their possession, when the kneeling figure rose once more to his feet, and the whole party began to move together towards the house. Here they come, said I, and I returned to my former position, for it seemed beneath my dignity that they should find me watching them. Well, let 'em come, lad, let 'em come, said Silver cheerily. I've still a shot in my locker. The door opened, and the 5 men standing huddled together just inside pushed one of their number forward. In any other circumstances, it would have been a comical to see this slow advance, hesitating as he set down each foot, but holding his closed right hand in front of him. Step up, lad, cried Silver. I won't eat you. Hand it over, lubber. I know the rules, I do. I won't hurt a deputation. Thus encouraged, the buccaneer stepped forth more briskly, and having passed something to Silver from hand to hand, slipped yet more smartly back again to his companions. The sea cook looked at what had been given him. "The black spot. I thought so," he observed. "Where might you have got the paper? Why, hillo! Look here now. This ain't lucky. You've gone and cut this out of a Bible. What fools cut a Bible?" "Ah, there," said Morgan. "There, what did I say? No good'll come of that, I said." "Well, you've about fixed it now among you," continued Silver. "You'll all swing now, I reckon, what soft-headed lubber had a Bible." "It was Dick," said one. "Dick, was it? Then Dick can get to prayers," said Silver. "He's seen his slice of luck, has Dick, and you may lay to that." But here the long man with the yellow eyes struck in. "Belay that talk, John Silver," he said. "This crew has tipped you the black spot in full council, as in duty bound. Just you turn it over as in duty bound and see what's wrote there. Then you can talk." "Thank'ee, George," replied the sea cook. "You always was brisk for business, and has the rules by heart, George, as I'm pleased to see. Well, what is it anyway? Ah, deposed. That's it, is it? A very pretty rote, to be sure. Like print, I swear. Your hand a right, George? Why, you was getting quite a leaded man in this here crew. You'll be captain next, I shouldn't wonder. Just oblige me with that torch again, will you? This pipe don't draw." "Come now," said George. "You don't fool this crew no more. You're a funny man by your account. But you're over now, and you'll maybe step down off that barrel and help vote." "I thought you said you knowed the rules," returned Silver contemptuously. "Leastways, if you don't, I do. And I wait here. And I'm still your captain, mind, till you outs with your grievances and I reply. In the meantime, your black spot ain't worth a biscuit. After that, we'll see." "Okay," replied George. "You don't be under no kind of apprehension. We're all square, we are. First, you've made a hash of this cruise. You'll be a bold man to say no to that. Second, you let the enemy out of this here trap for nothing. Why did they want out? I dunno, but it's pretty plain they wanted it. Third, you wouldn't let us go at them upon the march. Oh, we see through you, John Silver. You want to play booty. That's what's wrong with you. And then, fourth, there's this here boy." "Is that all?" asked Silver quietly. "Enough too," retorted George. "We'll all swing and sun dry for your bungling." "Well, now, look here. I'll answer these 4 pints one after another until I'll answer 'em. I made a hash of this cruise, did I? Well, now, you all know what I wanted, and you all know if that had been done, that we'd have been aboard the Hispaniola this night as ever was, every man of us alive, and fit, and full of good plum duff. And the treasure in the hold of her, by thunder. Well, who crossed me? Who forced my hand, as was the lawful captain? Who tipped me the black spot the day we landed and began this dance? Ah, it's a fine dance. I'm with you there. And looks mighty like a hornpipe in a rope's end at Execution Dock by London town, it does. But who does it? Why, it was Anderson and Hans and you, George Mary, and you're the last above board of that same meddling crew, and you have and you have the Davy Jones's insolence to up and stand for captain over me. You that sank the lot of us, by the powers. This tops the stiffest yarn to nothing. Silver paused, and I could see by the face of George and his late comrades that these words had not been in vain. That's for number one, cried the accused, wiping the sweat from his brow, for he had been talking with a vehemence that shook the house. Why, I give you my word, I'm sick to speak to you. You've neither sense nor memory, and I leave it to you to fancy where your mother's was that let you come to see. See, gentlemen of fortune, I reckon tailors is your trade. Go on, John, said Morgan. Speak up to the others. Ah. Ah, the others, returned John. They're a nice lot, ain't they? You say this cruise is bungled. Ah, by gum, if you could understand how bad it's bungled, you would see. We're that near the gibbet that my neck's stiff with thinking on it. You've seen 'em, maybe, hanged in chains, birds about 'em, seamen pinting them out as they go down with the tide. Who's that, says one. That, why, that's John Silver. I knowed him well, says another, and you can hear the chains a jangle as you go about and reach for the other buoy. Now, that's about where we are, every mother's son of us, thanks to him, and Hans, and Anderson, and other ruination fools of you. And if you want to know about number 4 and that boy, why, shiver my timbers, isn't he a hostage? Are we a-going to waste a hostage? No, not us. He might be the last chance, and I shouldn't wonder. Kill that boy. Not me, mates. Ah, number 3. Ah, well, there's a deal to say to number 3. Maybe you don't count it nothing to have a real college doctor to see you every day. You, John, with your head broke. Or you, George Mary, that had the ague shakes upon you not 6 hours agone, and has your eyes the color of lemon peel to this same moment on the clock. And maybe, perhaps you didn't know there was a consort coming either, but there is, and not so long till then, and we'll see who'll be glad to have a hostage when it comes to that. And as for number 2, and why I made a bargain, well, you came crawling on your knees to me to make it. On your knees you came. You was that downhearted, and you'd have starved too if I hadn't. But that's a trifle. You look here, and that's why. And he cast down upon the floor a paper that I instantly recognized, none other than the chart on yellow paper with the 3 red crosses that I had found in the oilcloth at the bottom of the captain's chest. Why the doctor had given it to him was more than I could fancy. But if it were inexplicable to me, the appearance of the chart was incredible to the surviving mutineers. They leapt upon it like cats upon a mouse. It went from hand to hand, one tearing it from the other, and by the oaths and cries and the childish laughter with which they accompanied their examination, you would have thought not only they were fingering the very gold, but were at sea with it besides in safety. Yes, said one, that's Flint, sure enough, J.F., and a score below, with a clove hitch to it. So he done ever. Mighty pretty, said George. But now we are to get away with it, and us no ship. Silver suddenly sprang up, supporting himself with a hand against a wall. Now I give you warning, George, he cried. One more word of your sauce, and I'll call you down and fight you. How? Why? How do I know you? You had ought to tell me that. You and the rest that lost me my schooner, with your interference, burn you. But not you. You can't. You ain't got the invention of a cockroach. But civil you can speak, and shall, George Mary? You may lay to that. That's fair enough, said old man Morgan. Fair? I reckon so, said the sea cook. You lost the ship. I found the treasure. Who's the better man at it? Now I resign, by thunder. Elect whom you please to be your captain now. I'm done with it. Silver, they cried, Barbecue forever, barbecue for Captain. So that's the tune, is it? Cried the cook. George, I reckon you'll have to wait another turn, friend, and lucky for you, as I'm not a revengeful man, but that was never my way. And now, shipmates, this black spot. 'Tain't much good now, is it? Dick's crossed his luck and spoiled his Bible, and that's about all. It'll do to kiss the book on still, won't it? Growled Dick, who was evidently uneasy at the curse he had brought upon himself. A Bible with a bit cut out? Returned Silver derisively. Not it. It don't bind no more'n a ballad hook. A ballad book. Don't it, though? Cried Dick with a sort of joy. Well, I reckon that's worth having, too. Here, Jim. For here's a curiosity for you, said Silver, and he tossed me the paper. It was around the size of a crown piece. One side was blank, for it had been the last leaf. The other contained a verse or two of Revelation, these words among the rest, which struck sharply home upon my mind. Without are dogs and murderers. The printed side had been blackened with wood ash, which already began to come off and soil my fingers. On the blank side had been written with the same material, and one word, deposed. I have that curiosity beside me at this moment, but not a trace of writing now remains beyond a single scratch, such as a man might make with his thumbnail. That was the end of the night's business. Soon after, with a drink all around, we lay down to sleep, and the outside of Silver's vengeance was to put George Merry up for sentinel and threaten him with death if he should prove unfaithful. It was long ere I could close an eye, and heaven knows I had matter enough for that in the man whom I had slain that afternoon, in my own most perilous position, and above all in the remarkable game that I saw Silver now engaged upon, keeping the mutineers together with one hand and grasping with the other after every means possible and impossible to make his peace and save his miserable life. He himself slept peacefully and snored aloud, yet my heart was sore for him, wicked as he was, to think on the dark perils that environed the shameful gibbet that awaited him. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 29. Thus, we are finished with our reading for today, along with dog accompaniment, unfortunately. But here we are, and we do what we do, and we have another round of the Adventure and Mystery Book Club. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for putting up with all of the things that are going on here today. And we'll hopefully see you again on Monday. Things will hopefully be a little bit better on Monday. We shall see. Join us then at 4 p.m. As always, thank you again, and take care, everyone. Have a good weekend.